animation are shining. It's time to stay tuned. And now, here's your host, Machi.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stay Tuned Live. And this is an all-new live stream talk show presented to you by Streaming the Magic right here on Facebook. My name is Machi. I am an animator, cartoonist, former Disney cast member, and it is my sincere pleasure to be your host each week as we deep dive into the world of animated film. Before the show starts tonight, I'd like to tell you a little bit about a very special project in my life. Last week, my guest was Disney animator Travis Blaze, and he asked me about my own animated short, but there wasn't enough time to get to that. So I'm going to tell you now. So for over 12 years now, I've been developing a series, a comic strip series called Retail Sunshine. You can see a little of those characters behind me now, actually. And as of this recording, there are 3 books published and a ton of merchandise, and most recently, an animated short is in development. This is a labor of love project for me, and I'm hand drawing every frame on paper with pen and pencil and crayon. Now, I'm hoping to have the short finished sometime this year, but if you'd like to follow my progress online, you can simply search Retail Sunshine right here on Facebook or on Instagram. I hope you guys like what you see, and remember to keep watching this space for the eventual big premiere. Okay, my special guest tonight is Dave Bossert. Dave is an award-winning author and inventor. For over 30 years, his contributions at Walt Disney Feature Animation have covered films such as The Nightmare Before Christmas, Aladdin, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Beauty and the Beast, and Fantasia 2000, to name a few. He's here tonight to talk about his years working in feature animation, visual effects, to be specific, and his many book projects. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Bossert.
Hi, Phil. How are you?
Oh,
I just sort of popped up there. I was
welcome.
Almost startled me.
That's okay. It's okay. I didn't mean to startle you, but I'm really very thankful to have you here. Welcome to Stay Tuned Live.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I hope you had a great day in Austin, Texas. It was nice and toasty out here in Los Angeles.
It was a very warm day here. Believe it or not, I celebrated the wonderful sun by planting a cactus.
Nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
I was going to jump in the pool, but I didn't. So.
It's a good day for that, but you've got plenty of those days ahead of you, I think. So don't worry.
Absolutely.
I wanted to jump right in here because we got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and let's get started with talking a little bit about effects animation. It's an absolutely vital component to animated film, but I think it kind of falls a little bit under the category of the unsung hero territory. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, I've always referred to what used to be called special effects, and now people call visual effects. And I always viewed it as a supporting character within any of the animated films. It was a good supporting character, and as with all supporting characters, great supporting characters, they have their moment. And in every one of the Disney films, there's that sequence that is very heavy in special effects.
Can you name one that comes to mind that was just an absolute bear, but once it was finished, it was just like stunning and you loved it?
Well, I immediately flash on the Firebird sequence for Fantasia 2000 because that was such an effects-heavy sequence in that film. In fact, one of the main characters, the Firebird itself, was really made up of special effects animation. So some of the drawings, by the way, for the Firebird took upwards of 8 hours a drawing. 8 hours to do one drawing.
And that's got to be intimidating because there's always the possibility that at the end of 8 hours, you feel like maybe you have to redo it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for that sort of, we're talking like fire and smoke and that kind of thing, right?
Well, just to create the Firebird creature, there was multiple layers. There was sort of a base layer, and I want to give a shout out to my friend John Pomeroy because he did the rough character animation, and there was never really any cleanup character animation done because it kind of went to the effects department, and we created all these multiple layers of effects that were processed differently to ultimately create the look of that Firebird.
Okay. So what we're seeing in the final film is the result of several different layers, but they're all moving over top of each other.
That's exactly right. They all fit together. For instance, like the dark crust, that forms on lava. If you've ever seen live action lava, like Mauna Loa over in Hawaii, there's always a cooling crust on top of it that's sort of a black, dense, almost like rock material, and then you see the molten lava underneath it. And so, one of the things that we did in that particular sequence was we looked at the Rite of Spring from the original Fantasia.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, they did some wonderful lava animation. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. But one of the things that was missing was this secondary layer, this cooling layer of this crust that starts to form on top of the lava. And so that's what we wanted to add that into the Firebird, because that particular level actually helps to define the facial features and, some of the other features on the creature itself. So
that was produced where in Florida at the feature animation.
No, that was completely done in Los Angeles.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. The whole most of, in fact, pretty much all of the Fantasia 2000, with the exception of we had some large herds of animals that were done over in London. Okay. On the Pomp and Circumstance sequence, and I'm trying to think. There was some Downtime, and the Rhapsody in Blue sequence really was like one of the only sequences I wasn't really directly involved with. That was done by a group that was on Downtime in Los Angeles.
So when you have Downtime, let's say there's a film or a sequence that doesn't have as much effects animation needed. Where would they have put you at that point?
Well, it's so funny. I actually had somebody send me a question earlier. Actually, it was later last week. It was like the middle of last week, I guess it was. Oh. He sent me a question. He says, what was the typical, what was your longest downtime period?
Yeah.
And I had to think back. It was actually after we completed Black Cauldron and before we really got going on The Great Mouse Detective. We had almost a year of downtime.
Oh, wow. So, when that happens, are you still doing things for the company? Or
Yeah. So, for me, I was low man on the totem pole on Black Cauldron. That was my first picture that I did at the studio. And so I was thinking I was getting laid off at the end of that picture, by the way. Oh. And people around me are getting pink slips, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, I'm going to get laid off. But I had worked so much overtime on Black Cauldron, and I was living with a buddy down in Marina del Rey. We had a place on the beach, and I was looking forward to like 3 or 4 months of just hanging out on the beach in California. And I literally had to go in, and Don Hahn was the production manager on that picture. I went into Don's office and I said, hey, can you give me an idea when you're going to lay me off? I just want to kind of plan out my summer. And I was matter of fact and just completely relaxed about it. I wasn't upset or anything. It was my first job out of school. And it was actually my second job out of school, I should say. But anyway, it was my first animated feature. And Don looked at me, he goes, oh yeah, we're not letting you go.
Oh, good.
And I think I did like a Tex Avery take where my jaw hit the floor, my eyes popped out,
Yeah.
and but I wound up taking a little time off vacation wise. But Don did something that I will never forget, and it was probably the best education I ever got in the animation business. He asked me, because they didn't have anything for me to do right away, if I wouldn't mind helping out the ink and paint department in painting cells on the Black Cauldron. So, mind you, I had just finished doing, in-betweening and assistant work on effects for the Black Cauldron. So they put me into a unit with a lovely lady named Karen, oh gosh, her name just flashed on me, and I'm Karen Comella was her name. She headed up this little ink and paint unit, and naturally they gave me all the effects animation to paint, which was quite tedious and crazy to paint a lot of that stuff because there was so much detail and little bits flying around and whatnot.
Some of the effects though in Black Cauldron were, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they looked as if they were referencing like they filmed something, and then that filming part.
Yeah. So, and that's a great point. In fact, it's so funny you mention these things, and I can say I just wrote an article on that.
Oh, cool.
On camera operations, and I actually used some bits and pieces I have still from the Black Cauldron, and it's on Cartoon Research, Jerry Beck's Cartoon Research.
Okay, yes.
So if you go to Jerry Beck's, it's cartoonresearch.com. Okay. And along the top, there's a bunch of names. You'll see my last name in that jumble. And if you just click on my last name, you'll see it's actually the second article down because they just published the new article today that I put up. But I have some examples of the live action. So they did some like dry ice sort of smoke stuff coming out of the cauldron. They filmed that. Actually, live action effects have been used at the Disney studios going back to the 1930s. I
was going to ask you that. Are there a lot of other feature animated films where there was a live action effect in it? Yeah,
in fact, oftentimes you'll look at the Disney feature films and like Rain. A lot of times is live action Rain. And the rain that they shot in the late 30s, early 40s for Bambi was stuff we were still using when I was at the studio. We used the rain from that was shot, the live action rain that was shot on Bambi. We actually used that in Pocahontas and Beauty and the Beast, and it was crazy. And so pre-computer days, the live action was printed out as stats, and it would be double exposed into the film when they shot it on cartoon cameras. But when we went digital, we had all of that material scanned. And so we were able to use that in the compositing process in the computers. So all of that material that they shot, 70 years ago, whatever it is now, 80 years ago, was still being used. And obviously today, I don't think they're using any of that stuff because, everything is digital films. And so they're just generating what they need. A what?
The Wilhelm scream, it's that scream that keeps being used. It's almost like a Wilhelm scream. It's like reusing it as an homage to the original or something.
Yeah, well, to some degree, it was not necessarily an homage, but it was a nice tip of the hat to the previous generation. But it was great stuff. And then certainly for like Black Cauldron, they shot new material that they needed to use, like the ectoplasm and the stuff coming out of the cauldron. And so there's a great litho neg on my attached to my article on Cartoon Network, Cartoon Research.com that you can actually see.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for letting all of us know about that.
Yeah. So, but again, that was always the exciting part about special effects for me was that it wasn't just drawing and doing animation by hand. It was also how you process that artwork in the camera department or in the computer system that came into play later on, and doing things like slot gags and all kinds of fun stuff that really added the magic into a lot of those scenes,
Yeah, it is. It's a bunch of elements coming together. It's not simply a series of drawings. There's a lot of other pieces that can go into it.
Yeah, and even like with the Disney animated films, because they're such high quality, it is that attention to detail. It is putting, oftentimes I would tell people when I went out to speak, you would do some effects. Sometimes you didn't necessarily see it overtly, you felt it. And if it wasn't there, you'd feel like something was missing, Yeah,
that was, I remember, because Jurassic Park had a big influence on me, obviously not a Disney film, but I remember learning about the special effects of Jurassic Park, and one of the things that I always thought was fascinating that made it just that much more real would be when the Rex would stomp in the rain puddle, they would go in and digitally put a little bit of a splash in that rain puddle, and it made all the difference.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily focus on those kinds of things, but if it wasn't there, you'd feel like something was missing, and it wasn't completely integrated into the shot.
Absolutely. So we were talking about Fantasia a moment ago, and I kind of wanted to bring that up just really quick because Fantasia is this really important thing in Disney history, but I feel like it gets overlooked. And it was supposed to be this kind of annual tradition that would have portions swapped out for newer ones and things like that. When you worked on Fantasia 2000, was there this concept of, hey guys, if this does really well, maybe we're going to go ahead and do what Disney originally wanted, which was to make this be a traditional thing?
Yeah, yes. So after we did Fantasia 2000, Roy wanted to do another Fantasia. We kind of dubbed it Fantasia World. And because it was going to encompass musical pieces from different cultures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so some of those pieces you may have actually already seen because we had done The Little Match Girl.
Yes.
Which had a Russian piece of music.
Beautiful.
We did Mike Gabriel's Lorenzo, which is just an absolutely beautiful little short. That was done to Argentinian tango music.
Yes.
There was I had actually an Aboriginal piece that I had pitched, and we had gotten it to a story reel point. And that was going to be a 2-minute short. I actually have that right now. At some point, I'm actually going to actually finish it. When I left Disney, they let me take that with me. So,
that's good. They're going to release a piece of
which is super unusual, I have to say.
Yeah.
But
how are you going to release that? Is that going to be a thing that people can?
Well, no. I mean, if I do it at some point in the future, I'm just going to do it the way I had planned it out, and it's just going to be a short, and it would be something to go out into the festivals or whatever.
That's amazing. Please keep me keep me in the loop on that. I'd like to know about that.
So and there, Mike Gabriel had developed some other pieces, and I know Eric Goldberg had done a few things. There was a neat piece done to Indian music. So cool. We were kind of moving along. One by One was another one that hasn't really been widely seen out there. They kind of threw it onto, I think, Lion King 2 or something. That was a direct to DVD. I actually sort of accidentally co-directed that. And I say accidentally because I was the artistic coordinator and visual effects supervisor on the project, and the director left midstream. So they looked to me to finish it. So I did, and they wound up giving me a co-director credit on it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, but I literally remember being in Roy's conference room with Don Hahn It was Don, myself, and Roy, and pinning up index cards on a board as to what the order was going to be for this third Fantasia movie. And then, unfortunately, Roy got ill and then eventually died. And that really kind of put the end to that, I think, because Fantasia is an interesting project because there wasn't a lot of excitement with people like Jeffrey Katzenberg when we first started working on Fantasia 2000, because it wasn't viewed as being a very commercial type project. I always looked at Fantasia as being almost art for art's sake. And there was an inherent beauty in watching not only the original Fantasia but the Fantasia 2000. And Walt's ultimate vision for Fantasia was that it was an ever-evolving movie, that it would constantly go out to theaters, on some kind of a regular basis and have new sequences in. Sure. Some sequences taken out. In fact, when I first got involved in Fantasia 2000, they had not only Sorcerer's Apprentice part of it, but Night on Bald Mountain and Dance of the Hours were also going to be part of Fantasia 2000.
That would have been great.
And ultimately, as we kept moving along working on the film, Bald Mountain and Dance of the Hours dropped away, and it was just going to be Sorcerer's Apprentice that would be restored and be part of Fantasia 2000. And part of the reasoning was that the other sequences represented the decades that went by, not literally represented, but just numerically represented the decades that had passed since the original Fantasia had been completed. Oh, and by the way, I should also mention the other sequence that was going to get thrown in that would have sort of broken the mold a little bit was Destino, because
I was going to ask
because we were looking at possibly having Destino as part of that lineup.
Right.
And of course, Destino has lyrics to a song and a female singer on that. So
that's that collaboration between Salvador Dali
that was Walt Disney and Salvador Dali in 1946. You can read all about it in the book I wrote.
Which book we talking about, Dave?
Let's plug here. The book is Dali and Disney, and it was released through Disney Editions. 5 years ago, I think.
Okay, well, because you have so many books, I didn't know which one you were talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, there's there. I think some people looked at Fantasia from a movie standpoint. It just wasn't something that was going to be super commercial viable. Where it would go out, like they're more excited and more focused on things that are going to go out and make $100 million in the opening weekend. Yeah. And if you're going to do a film that does $10 or $20 million opening weekend or something like that, there's not a lot of excitement. There's not a lot of enthusiasm as there is when they have a film that's potentially going to generate, $1 billion over its theatrical run.
Sure, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to imagine to project that it could have been something that turned into a tradition for people. A lot of films like the Harry Potter series or Lord of the Rings, they would come out around Christmas, and then subsequent years, people would say, "Well, we go to the theater to watch the next installment of that." And so I think it could have turned into that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I listen. You're not going to get an argument from me on that. Right. I believe it because and there were live concerts. They did a live version of Fantasia at the Hollywood Bowl, and there's more of that happening where they've actually the music division at Disney licenses these shows now so that local orchestras in Seattle or Atlanta or wherever can license a package that has the film and all that, the click tracks, and they can do a live performance to these films. And there's nothing like that to me is going to a venue and seeing a movie, a great movie with a live orchestration. I mean, it's just great experience.
Absolutely.
So, there was a lot of things that you could do with it, but again, for me, for a company as large as Disney, I don't know. It wouldn't have been a big deal to do a Fantasia every so many years, especially with the fact that they had this shorts program, and they would make these internal shorts, and half the time they never knew what to do with it, and there were always people changing out, and it was like, oh, well, we'll throw it into a festival and maybe we'll win some awards, or we'll expect to win an award, or we'll expect to win an Academy Award or something like that. And to me, I don't think they ever recouped, some of the money that they spent on some of those shorts. And but you could have looked at your shorts program as, okay, every 5 years we're going to have 5 new shorts, and then we're going to package those and we're going to release them into a feature with a couple of sequences from the other Fantasias, and you've got almost a free movie to some degree, you know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah.
But, I think that, they do what they have to do, and, there's people making choices, and, I certainly look at Fantasia, like I said earlier, as art for art's sake. And I think that you can take that stance with some of this material and still actually make it a revenue generator.
Yeah, it just takes the creative spin on it. Especially, like you said, especially if you're reusing sequences from the past, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to say you could make money on it. Eventually, you transitioned from effects animation and you went into this special projects division of Walt Disney. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like? Because it sounds like it was a bit of a hodgepodge of a lot of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I always had people telling me I was a very entrepreneurial person while I was at the studio, and I was always jumping in and helping people on different things, and so when I finished Fantasia 2000, I kind of looked at Fantasia 2000 as being my swan song, if you will, for doing feature films. It was sort of like I didn't think I was going to work on something as great as that picture. Okay. For me personally, just artistically. And also I had been working on feature films at that point for 16 years. And so I was starting to feel a little antsy and wanting to do other things. And at the time, Tom Schumacher was president of Disney Animation, and he started asking me to do these oddball projects like what I mentioned earlier, the Little Match Girl, and One by One, and Lorenzo, and then I got involved with Destino because Roy was executive producing that. And in between, there were these weird requests that were coming into animation for assets from some of our films. Could repurpose things for shows at the parks, and it just evolved into this special projects unit. It wasn't the first time that there was a special projects unit. Back during Walt's day, they just integrated those little projects within the animation department. So if they did a I Like Ike commercial with the Disney characters like they did in the 50s, then it was just the animation people just got together and they just knocked it out in between whatever they were working on. And then
a catch-all for anything that's not a feature animated film and not television animation.
What's that? Special projects?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my unit became, because we were doing essentially We were repurposing assets from existing properties. We were creating new assets. We were extending animation of existing animation. We did something on World of Color where if you know in Bambi, the skating sequence with Thumper and Bambi, it's a bunch of small scenes all intercut. We turned that into one long scene, so it needed bridge animation to hook all the scenes together. So we went and we conceptualized that and visualized what we were going to do, and we brought on the talent that we needed to get that accomplished. And so, and by the way, like I said, when I first started working, I think I did some work on like the Exxon Energy Pavilion at Epcot. That some scenes came through the effects department when I was working on Black Cauldron. And so
you were always kind of involved with
there was always those little things coming in, and my philosophy was always anybody came in and said, can you help us? It was always, yeah, sure. What do you need? You always said yes.
My favorite project, or at least one of my favorite ones, is the one I got to know you through, which was the one for 101 Dalmatians.
I
love you took the TV show that the kids were watching and you made it into a real thing that you could watch.
Yes, exactly. And that was, again, those were like bonus features, again, with the introduction of VHS and then DVD, the home entertainment division had these healthy budgets for each release. And so they could do, little documentaries, and they could do bonus features and stuff to include on the DVD disc that was giving, added value to the people that were buying the movies.
Can you expand on that just one moment? You're saying that the budgets for the home video division, so I'm sure a lot of people, who think about Disney think of it as one giant blob, but it's really divided into a bunch of smaller segments, right?
Yeah. So the way you have to look at the Walt Disney Company is it's just a ton of small companies under the umbrella of the Walt Disney Company.
Right.
And so, Walt Disney Home Entertainment is like this little standalone division, and, they live and die by their profit and loss statements,
Sure.
And so during the heyday of home entertainment, they would release a DVD and it would generate hundreds of millions of dollars, so it was only natural that you'd have these healthy budgets. But as streaming has sort of taken over and DVD market has gone down, and they don't sell DVDs as much as they used to, the budget shrank drastically on those releases to the point where they really couldn't do much. They were recycling stuff towards the end. But as I was saying with special projects, so a lot of the stuff would fly through the animation department and get taken care of, as did a lot of the early Wonderful World of Disney animation and things they needed to do in the 50s and 60s for the TV show. That stuff would go through the animation department and it would just get done. And then I think I'm not exactly sure when it was, but there was a unit down at the Florida studio. I'm trying to remember what the heck their name was. It'll come to me. It wasn't called Special Projects. It was Creative Services. So there was this Creative Services group at the Florida studio, and I think it was Chuck Williams who headed that. And he went on to produce what the heck did he produce? Mulan, or I think he produced Mulan. One of those projects. Anyway, I can't remember everybody's resume off the top of my head. I know I should know what all my colleagues have worked on. Yeah. But anyway, so he had Creative Services down in Florida, and then that just kind of like dissolved. I don't know really what happened, and then and then the stuff was, they were trying to get stuff done, and I just sort of started handling a lot of that stuff, and it sort of gelled into this special projects group, and then we wound up doing animation, anything related to Disney classic animation or the current feature animation that was going on at the studio. We were doing stuff all over the company. I mean, it was, the gaming division, the theme parks, cruise lines, publishing, music, it goes on and on,
Like basically it's like you got a project you don't know what to do with, you just got to call Dave Bossert.
Yeah, oftentimes, a lot of times I would get emails from somebody at some far-flung office, like, I remember one that came through. I came into my office. I was always an early person, so I would come into my office at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I had this email from somebody in Japan, and they were remodeling their offices over there, and somebody wanted just an image of Steamboat Willie that they could have etched onto glass. For a conference room wall divider, to kind of make.
Or outside of Disney.
What's that?
That they wanted that within the company.
It was the Disney offices. I think it was in Japan, or I think it was Tokyo.
Okay.
And it was crazy stuff like that, and it was sort of like I could open a folder on my desktop and pull the image out and go, here you go, and it didn't cost them anything because. Why would it? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, we were helping out our colleagues around the company. So for tiny little things like single images or just pointing somebody in the right direction, we weren't going to charge them for that. Wow. And we always had, 8 to 10 different bigger projects in the department anyway at any given time. So taking 5 minutes to pull an image and send it to somebody and say, is this what you're looking for? And they go, oh my gosh, yes, that's it. And you're like, okay, bye. Have fun.
Well, that's cool. And there's that kind of like this link between all the different parts of the company kind of gives you a way to keep in touch with everyone, I guess.
Well, yeah, and it was just very gratifying to be able to have that kind of an overview of all the things that were going on. And also, what was kind of cool about it was that you might get sucked into a project at one division and you'd say, oh my gosh, we're doing X over at this other division, and I wonder if we can get some economies of scale here and share some of those resources. And so people wound up, they would save money and, on their budgets, and we'd still be able to give them great quality and all of that. So, it was a lot of fun. I had a really good time doing it and building that group up. And, we did a lot of very, very cool projects with a great team of people. And that's I think part of the real joy of it is working with a great team of artists and technicians and, production people. And it was fun.
That's kind of the, I don't want to use the word danger, but I'll just say the word danger. That's kind of the danger with having something umbrellaed under a corporate name is people maybe forget that these projects are coming from individuals, and those each project has a different set of people creating them. But thankfully, we got people like you who are highlighting things, folks like that. I'm going to segue. This is a very clever segue. I'm very proud of it. Into talking about Claude Coates and how you've written a book about him.
I thank you for that. Yes, I'm in the midst of worry. I was writing away this morning. I'm almost done. I'm hopeful to be wrapping up my first draft in about 3 or 4 weeks. And Claude Coates is a great example of somebody who he's one of the unsung heroes. He's not necessarily a household name, and right. But I'm trying to make him a household name because he was really one of the most talented background painters at the studio during the golden age of animation at Disney. And but he was a 6 foot 6 inch tall guy. I mean, big man. I knew him, by the way. I met him. Nice. I met him early on in my career. I used to chat with him at the commissary at Imagineering back in the mid 1980s, and incredibly nice man, very soft spoken, very sensitive artist. Very thoughtful. He had tremendous respect for everybody. He treated everybody just wonderfully. And here's a guy who did some of the most magnificent backgrounds at Disney Animation. If you look at Geppetto's workshop,
yes,
I mean, the mastery that he had of watercolor, just the technical mastery of that medium is unbelievable. I mean, just gorgeous backgrounds that he did for Pinocchio, and also he worked on the Wishing Well sequence of Snow White. He did much of the background styling and color for Ferdinand the Bull, the old mill.
Love the old mill.
Yeah, and so incredibly talented. By 1955, he was just finishing off work on Lady and the Tramp.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know this, and there's a little bit of it in the book, and we have some neat photos of him. He did some painting for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He did some of the maps that are in the chart room of the Nautilus, the large oversized maps. And so he's doing that. He finishes backgrounds on Lady and the Tramp. He's doing illustrations for the Golden Book of Lady and the Tramp that's going to release when the film releases.
Oh my gosh.
And then Walt asked him to build a model because Claude has an architectural background. He went to USC for architecture and then switched to fine art. But on Lady and the Tramp, he was building models of the some of the sets so that the artist could get sort of a dog's eye view of what the rooms look like and so on. So he liked to build models. And
he did some Haunted Mansion work too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. But he wound up, Walt asked him to do a model, build a model of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
Okay.
And then he asked Claude to paint some of the flats in the model. And he thought nothing of it. He thought, Walt just wants me to help out here because Walt was building Disneyland, but Claude wasn't involved at that point. And then the company that was supposed to paint the flats for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, they came to Walt and said, "We don't have the bandwidth to do it. We don't have the manpower, and we're not going to make the deadline." So Walt went to Claude and Ken Anderson and said, "You guys are going to paint the flats." And they wound up painting the flats in what was called the effects building on the back lot of the Burbank studio, which was this corrugated steel building. And they had the flats hanging there, and they painted these large scale flats for that ride. And really, I really put in the book that it was at that moment that Claude became an Imagineer. He's one of the original Imagineers that joined Wet Enterprises, and he started from that point on. He started working, and he said that was the beginning of his second career at Disney, because he had painted backgrounds for 20 years, and for him, he had sort of been there, done that. And so this was a natural transition for him, as an artist to grow,
Sure. And these flats are you're referring to the wooden pieces that as you're moving through the ride would kind of separate one room from the next and then open up. Is that what you're referring to?
No, the flats are like all of the murals that are inside.
Okay.
It's not just the bump doors opening or anything like that. It's all the painted surfaces, with the characters on them and all that.
Gotcha.
All the scenes.
That's awesome. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a huge...
And he actually painted the mural outside in the ride loading area.
Oh, wow. And that's a massive mural too.
Yeah, it's a massive mural. The one that's there now is a reproduction. It's a newer version, but he had painted the original one.
Okay, wow, that's incredible. And so you're writing this book about Claude Coats, and I understand that there's a bit of history tied into the experience of writing the book with the specific desk you're on, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I am sitting here talking, and I'm looking at. I wish you got. I mean, I can't lift up my computer and turn it around. I wish I could, but
a mirror somewhere you could maybe do some.
I know I really should, but I have this 1939 Kem Weber desk, and I've been working on this desk, by the way, for more than I guess it's close to 30 years. I didn't have this desk when I first started at the company. I acquired this desk a couple years after I started at the company. So it's almost about 30 years that I've been working on this desk. And so when I was leaving, they came in and said, "Hey, would you like your desk?" And I was actually, like, internally, I was completely shocked, you know? And I said to them, I paused, obviously, for a moment, and I looked at the desk and I said, "Yeah, sure, you know, but how am I going to get it up to my house?" And they're like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll have the studio movers drive it to your house for you." And I was like, "Okay," you know, and but it was funny because I was working on another book project. It was actually Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, the visual companion, which someday will come out. I don't know when, but I wrote it 2 years ago. It was supposed to come out last year. It was supposed to come out actually this month. And now they're telling me it's going to come out next month. Not next month, next year, June.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you, you know, it's like, but the funniest thing was that I'm sitting there working on that manuscript at this Kem Weber desk. And I just kind of, you know, I leaned back. I was taking a break. I put my hands behind my head and I'm looking around. I'm looking at this desk and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if anybody's written anything about Kem Weber. And then I wound up blowing the rest of the afternoon, like, researching, you know, what was written about Kem Weber out there. And there really was nothing that documented this furniture. And he designed 22 pieces of furniture for Walt Disney Animation Studios back in 1939 when Walt had the Burbank studio lot built, you know, because prior to 1939, they were at the Hyperion studio.
Okay.
And so with the success of Snow White, Walt was able to buy this 52-acre lot in Burbank. And he was, you know, he had engaged Kem Weber, who was this, you know, notable mid-century architect. He was heading up the architectural and industrial design department at Art Center in Pasadena, you know, during the Depression. And so, you know, his philosophy was a holistic philosophy of design. And so it wasn't just about designing the building. It was designing the building, the interiors, and the furnishings that went in it. So there was a design thread that went through everything, and it all fit together beautifully. And in some sense, it kind of felt a little sterile to some of the artists initially because of the ramshackle nature of the Hyperion facility, you know. And so, you know, they were working on, at Hyperion, they had off-the-shelf wooden desks that they put angled drawing boards on and, you know, put shelving up behind the drawing boards to put their paper on and all of that. And so here they are coming into the studio, this brand new studio, and they've got animation desks that were designed to be animation desks with the shelving already integrated into them and all of those things. And so, you know, this was furniture that I kind of felt like, since there was nothing written about it, I wanted to write it. I went and interviewed a lot of the artists that I had worked with over the years in all the different disciplines. I interviewed, you know, people like Don Hahn and John Musker, who, you know, directed Aladdin and co-directed Aladdin and Little Mermaid and Hercules and Moana and a whole bunch of other films. Jim Coleman, the great fine artist today, was head of backgrounds at the studio years ago, and, you know, I interviewed him and Brenda Chapman and just, a ton of great folks. Roger Allers is another one. He co-directed Lion King. I went and either I talked to them in person or we did a Skype interview and just got their thoughts on the actual furniture. I mean, what they think of it, what was it like working on this, and everybody had their own different take on it, and their own different stories. But it's like the furniture has a soul to it because when you think about it, like, who worked on this desk, and somebody, I'm not sure who it was, but years ago, back in the 80s, somebody was going around with a marker and writing underneath the desk, out of sight, under the drawing board, like who might have had that desk, because all these old timers were starting to retire, And so that adds to the provenance of the furniture itself. That was Eric Larson's desk, or that desk belonged to Jack Buckley in the effects department. Because once these guys had these desks, I mean, a lot of times they worked on them for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And so there's this beautiful patina to the desk, and there is kind of a soul to it, and for me, even though like I was moving up the ladder and I eventually wasn't on the board as much, I was producing, I was a creative director and things like that. I always kept this desk in my office, and that was just, I had dragged it around with me from office to office over the decades while I was at Disney. So to be able to leave the studio with it and now have it as my writing desk is, now I think I'm going on, 35 years or something working on this desk, and but yeah, it really does, it's like an old shoe, I come into my office and I slip into this old shoe every morning and I feel comfortable sitting here and I work away.
Beautiful. Well, before I go over to there might be questions from the audience. So if anybody is thinking of something, feel free to put that question in there, and I'll go ahead and we'll address that here in just a moment. I wanted to just kind of bring up one more thing that I thought was really fascinating while I was doing a little research about you, Dave. And in my mind, you are kin to Ub Iwerks in certain ways, because Ub was an animator, of course, at Disney, a major animator, but he also was this technical, mechanical, creative inventor.
He was a genius.
Yeah,
he was an absolute genius. I wouldn't consider myself even close to that.
But you're also, how many animators are also inventors? And you also have invented stuff, right? I mean, that's
something I do. I was fortunate that I have a couple of patents. That and $2 will get me on the subway in New York. But as far as I'm concerned, like those patents, they grew out of an idea I came up with. Okay, I visualized something that I said, wouldn't it be cool if we could do X? And I went and talked to the right people, and I got a couple of great software engineers onto the project, and they wrote the code. So it was really a team effort.
Sure.
And we didn't do it, when you approach things like that, you're approaching it because, this will be really cool to do, and it'll be a great new experience for people. Sure. Let's try and do this. You're not going into these things going, let's go do this because we'll get a patent.
No. It's more like necessity is the mother of invention, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. But we went about doing this because we thought it was a cool way of repurposing some existing assets that were created for the 3D Beauty and the Beast. And it worked really well, I have to say. And it wasn't until like a year later, one of the software engineers came down to my office and says, "Hey, they think we can get a patent." And I was like, "Well, that's cool," and so we filled out the paperwork, which was me just putting my X at the signature line, and then you forget about it. And then it was like 2 years later that you find out you got a patent award. And then I just found out last month that the same idea spawned a second patent. So I just got a second patent award.
Congratulations.
But it was the team that did it. It really, I mean, you have to look at it from the standpoint that, you don't do these things by yourself. There's always a group of people. Even like any of these animated films or animated projects, there was always a team effort. You always brought these great people together, and out of those things, out of that sort of combination of talent, you did some wonderful things that, in hindsight, turned into great things. But you were just trying to, keep your head above water and get these movies finished. We always had a running joke that we never finished a movie. We never finished a movie. We just released it, because there was always tinkering that you wanted to do with stuff. And that's very evident when they were doing the 10-year anniversary re-releases. There would be some new sequence that gets put in, or the directors had a wish list of things they wanted to fix and all of that stuff. So,
well, I completely relate to that, and I've heard that from painters and sculptors, and I think that's a universal artist sort of feeling. We have time for a couple questions. I'll just kind of relay them to you here. We've got Hallie, who is in the room, and she wants to know, what is Dave's favorite Disney animated movie?
Well, for me, it's Pinocchio.
Oh,
I think, I think for me, Pinocchio is such a lush movie. It really is the pinnacle of the art form in my mind. It's something to strive for from a quality standpoint, from a detail standpoint, just from the skill level of the artistry.
Absolutely. And filmmaking. I mean, I will always tell people to this day, that scene where the kids turn into the donkeys is one of the creepiest things to watch. We got Ryan in the room, and Ryan says, Dave, what's one of your favorite projects that doesn't seem to get a lot of attention comparatively?
I think, to me, it's like Fantasia 2000, it's Destino, it's those kinds of projects that I hold near and dear to my heart, even, and by the way, I'll go back as far as my first picture, Black Cauldron. The Black Cauldron really doesn't get much in the way of notoriety or airplay. But I will tell you, back in the 1990s, I did some special screenings internally at Disney Animation of the Black Cauldron. Yeah. And it was always standing room only in the theater because so many people at that point had never seen the movie because it wasn't screened that frequently. If ever, actually. I don't think they ever did I don't even think they did a re-release on the movie.
No, I don't think so either. It's that old adage of they don't want to put time and attention to something that doesn't bring them money, but the argument you could be made, if you don't let people know about it, how could it ever get an audience to begin with? Yeah,
I'm telling you, I think if they decided on an anniversary to screen the Black Cauldron at the El Capitan in Hollywood, they'd probably sell out all the shows in a weekend because so many people have never seen that film projected on the big screen.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Black Cauldron, it has some incredible animation. There are young animators the baton was being passed by the old timers, the 9 old men. Absolutely. And you had these young bucks like Glenn Keane at the time and Andreas Deja and Phil Niblink and people like that who were grabbing that baton and trying to show what they could do. And so there's some really great artistry in the movie. It falls apart really. The story isn't the greatest story. They tried do too much. There was too many cooks in the kitchen on the story. And the movie was finishing up while there was a big management change out happening at the Disney studio. And so it really just kind of like fell through the cracks in my estimation. You know, when Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg came into the studio, Jeffrey looked at the Black Cauldron and wanted to see if they could, you know, re-edit the movie to make it to make the story flow better, but then it would have required to have new animated scenes done, and they didn't want to put any more money into it, and they just kind of chalked it up to that was the old regime. It had nothing to do with us. We're moving forward, you know. And so, but that it was a good question, you know. So there's very good question.
There's still some love out there for Black Cauldron. But Dave, we're kind of out of time, so I just want to thank you first of all for spending your time and just sharing your experiences with all of us. I really genuinely appreciate it.
Sure.
And if people want to learn more about you, obviously they can go to davebossert.com.
DavidBossert.com. And you know, I have a bunch of articles I've written over the years on animation under the articles tab. You can see some of the books that I have out, all of that junk.
One on Oswald, of course. We got an Oswald book.
Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. There's not only the regular edition, but there's also the special edition that came out last year with updated text and some images and stuff. And that actually, the special edition comes with a half a dozen lithographs. They're in an envelope on the back, inside back cover. So you can all that information is up on my website. At some point you'll be hearing about my 3D Disneyland book, which is coming out later this year, and there's a soft cover version of the Kem Weber book coming out. And
you make sure you let me know about that, and I'll make sure I communicate that on the Stay Tuned community page. And so
I will send you all that information as it becomes available. And I appreciate you, Phil. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And thanks to your audience for those people that tuned in. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Talk to you soon. All right, guys. Well, first of all, thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart for being here tonight, for supporting this show. It means the world to me. It is a continuation of a show, a podcast that I've done for 2 years now called Stay Tuned. So this is kind of a new incarnation of it. This is a video form of the show. So thank you guys. Please share this video with anyone you think might be interested. And I can only tell you that I will continue to do my best to bring you great content. So thank you for sharing it with those that you think would love it. I also want to take a moment to thank all of my Stay Tuned patrons. Your support, guys, continually encourages me each month and helps make it possible for me to keep doing what I do as an independent creator. So if you'd like to get involved, visit patreon.com/Philmachi to learn more about the various reward tiers, and you can sign up for free today. Of course, every bit of support does help. While you're at it, go ahead and check out my original comic books at philmachi.com. And be sure to say hi to me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under the handles of both Retail Sunshine and also Phil Machi. Be sure to join, please, the amazing Stay Tuned community that's growing on Facebook. It's a free thing you can do. There's daily news typically from around the world of animation. So you can get involved now at facebook.com/groups/Stay Tuners. I've been Phil Machi. You've been a wonderful audience. And until next week, keep those eyeballs peeled, those ears open, and be sure to stay tuned.